Good morning, everyone. My name is Neil Iverson. I'm a Vice President of Microsoft Productivity Solutions here at Avtex, and this is our Introduction to PowerApps webinar. This happens to be the first in a three-part PowerApps webinar series. You find yourself here at the first one. These webinars are archived, and you'll be able to watch these later. Additionally, I think there will be some other people who may be watching this before they're seeing the PowerApps with Flow or the third one. So the basic webinar series is today is the Introduction to PowerApps, and then on June 27th, so next week, it'll really be taking everything that we've learned today and applying it to Flow and Office 365, really making more out of what you have. And then right after the 4th of July break on Monday, July 9th, we'll be presenting on powering up dynamics with PowerApps. So very heavy integration into the Dynamics ecosystem. What does it mean, and what are some of the new capabilities that you can take advantage of inside of PowerApps? So for today, what we're going to do is kind of cover what is PowerApps, a basic general overview. And then what we're really going to do is create a new application and walk through the different components and steps that we would use in creating it, how we could collect data, and then what we can do with that data later on. So I'd like to start off with, first of all, what is PowerApps? What is the point of PowerApps, and why should I really care? So basically, PowerApps is an application that Microsoft has created that allows business users to quickly create cross-platform applications in a secure way that can then connect out to other systems and other data to create a unified experience and really integrate with multiple different features. So the key features inside of here are that it's a point-and-click designer. This isn't something where you have to download a big application. This isn't something where you have to have a computer science degree. This is something where you can drag and drop controls onto a screen and make an application. One of the other big features is that it's cross-platform. If you've used some of the form builders in the past, you know that they might work well on a desktop environment, or they might work well on a web environment, and they're not playing in all different spaces. So PowerApps was really built from the ground up to support running wherever the application needed to live. So out of the box, you get native web interface, you get a native mobile app for iOS and Android that also works in their mobile browsers, and then you also get desktop capabilities where you can run it from there. Additionally, security and identity are built in from the beginning. So the applications can be secured, they can be securely managed, and then the data that they access can also take advantage of that same identity and security considerations. So it's not an afterthought, it's something that you're starting with right away. You also have the ability to use familiar Excel-like formulas and functions so that you're not starting from scratch learning a completely new and foreign scripting language. It takes the syntax and the formulas that you may be familiar with, either from Excel or from some other scripting languages, and then it makes them easy to use inside of an application so that you can enhance it and build it out there. Finally, your application is not an island, and you're able to connect to all kinds of different systems and databases and even create your own connections to external data. So because you have your data in a PowerApp does not mean that it's stuck or tied to a PowerApp. You have the ability to get it out and make it useful somewhere else. So I'd like to start with kind of, well, what does it look like? So the design surface actually loads up in a web environment and looks pretty similar to some of the other builders out there, and then has some components that you might have seen in the Office suite. So the central area is the actual form, and then on the top is the formula bar. So just like Excel, you have the formula bar and then the property. So very, very Excel-like at the top. We have the ribbon for navigation between the items. And then we have additional properties on the right, and the ability to work with screens and different controls on the left. Now the controls are really how we make this come alive. Right here we have a blank canvas, and we need to be able to do something with it. So the controls that PowerApps currently has really are what enable us to build those applications. So first of all, when we think about text controls, we have a label. So this is essentially read-only text. That's what a label is. It could be a title, it could be a description, and it's kind of a workhorse. We end up using it quite a bit. The text input right below that, that's the input box. That's how we can collect text feedback that people can type in. HTML text below that, it allows us to format text with colors and styles using HTML and HTML codes. Below that is a rich text editor so that we can use a rich text designer to create our experience. And below that is pen input. So for mobile, for touchscreen devices, we can also take in touchscreen input and work with it there. And then finally, the ever popular button so that we can actually have it do something when we click on it. So those are kind of our basic text controls that we're working with. As we move over to the next set of controls, these are really about picking and choosing different items. So the first one is the drop-down box, which I think we're all pretty familiar with. Below that is the combo box, and that's where you have kind of the elements of a drop-down box where you can click the drop-down, you can select it, or you can type in the text that you're looking for inside a drop-down box. So if you have a lot of list items, that's a good fit. Below that, we have the date picker, which is pretty self-explanatory, and then the list box, which is similar to a drop-down box, except everything is expanded out by default. In the section below that, we have a few different ways that we can handle options and checkboxes. So the first one is an actual checkbox, followed by radio boxes over here, followed by an on-off switch. So depending on the types of things that we're looking for, those options and changes are very good ways to help select. The slider is another useful item on here where we can set a start position and an end position and really allow people to slide, to drag their finger on mobile devices or use the mouse on desktop devices. And then finally, we've got rating, which allows us to select a number of stars for the different items. So if we're rating content, if we're rating responses, we have that built into PowerApps as well. The last set of controls that I'm going to highlight are the timer control, which allows us to start and stop timers. Import-export, which allows us to import data and export PowerApp data from other runs. We have an embedded PDF viewer. We have an embedded Power BI viewer. And then we have attachments so that people can upload additional items. So if they want to upload an image, if they want to upload a document, a PDF, anything like that, we can use our attachment viewer to do that. So what I'd like to do now is actually walk through creating an application. So what I'll do is I'll go into the PowerApp environment. And inside of my PowerApp environment, I have the ability to see the applications that I've already created and create a new application. So I'll create a new app, and it's going to give me a few different options here. So if I want to work with an existing system, if I want to work with SharePoint, if I want to work with a database, I can already kind of get a shortcut here to start and have something that will already have some data in it. In my case, I want to start with a blank application. And then it asks me if I want to start with a phone layout or a tablet layout. Now, generally, I tend to start with a phone layout because for most of the applications that I'm working on, phone users are going to be a big part of it. And the tablet layout is basically if you're working off a tablet or a desktop, so you have a lot of that screen real estate. I know that people will be working on those devices, but I also want to make sure that I give a great experience to the phone people. So I'll click on the phone layout, and it will start me off with my application. Now, this is basically the same screen that I showed you earlier, where we find ourselves inside a blank PowerApp, and there isn't really anything in here. So we want to start by, we'll give this application a title. So I'll take our label box and put it inside. So we're going to name our application. So we can see right now our application is text. We will go ahead and create our application. We'll say that this is a travel request application. So we've now named our application. We can see that the text property is set here, and now we have a bunch of additional properties. So if I wanted to change the color of this, I could change the color. If I want to change the size, I can change the size. And we can see the other items that are available here. I can also see the same properties with this drop-down picker. So if I want to go here to color, we can see that this is the color that I selected with the picker. And there are some properties over here that do not show up on the property panel. This is kind of a list of all of them. The big one that we need to know is text, because that's the actual text of the item. So for our travel request, we know that we are going to want to have some different data. We're going to want to collect the traveler's name, their departure date. We'll kind of focus a little bit on an airport scenario. So we'll have the airports that they're leaving and arriving to, and then their return date. But one of the things that I want to also make sure that we do is along the way learn how to set these up so that we can maintain them. So we've created our title label here. We can see it over there. If I add a new label, and I'll change this to say traveler name, we can see that I have my traveler name and I have my travel request, but over here they're just named label 1 and label 2. Now this is one of the areas that a lot of people don't get too concerned about, but I like to try and keep things organized so that I can click on it and actually know what it means. So I'm going to rename these so that I can find them later. So I'll say this is label title, and this is label traveler name. By doing this, I can keep track of these as I get more and more put on the page. So now I have a label for the traveler name, but I actually want to collect the name. So I'll go down to text, and I'll say I need a text input. I'll put that right here. And then once again, we can see that it gave it a great name of text input 1, and I want to keep track of what it is. So I'm going to call it text traveler name. Now, if I want to see what this looks like right now, I can click the play button, and I can see the basic outlines of this application. So I can see in here, this is text, and I can basically type in text and see my labels. So far, it's not a super compelling example, but we'll go ahead and add a couple more things to it. So I'm going to paste in some labels from my my other screen so that you don't have to watch me put in all of these labels. And so we've got spots now. We know we want to collect a departure date, a departure airport, arrival airport, and an arrival return date. So we'll go ahead and say, all right, we want a date picker. And we'll grab the date picker and put it in. Put it right here. And then we will copy that for our return date, where we can say date return. So now we have a departure date and a return date. And now we'll add the ability to also specify the airports. And now we have a pretty basic looking form. So if we go and look right now, we can see that if we start this up, I can say, all right, it's Neil, I've got a date, I can specify a date, I can put an airport in here, I can say, there's a correct way to spell that somewhere, but you know, it's not auto-correcting me. It allowed me to put in dates that are in the past, and you know, generally it's a functional form, but it's not a super great form. So let's go ahead and add in a little bit of logic. So let's add a rule that says the departure date has to be today or later. You can't depart yesterday. So we'll go over to rules, and we'll say, I want to add a new rule. Now, one of the nice things is they have a set of default rules that we can use, so we don't actually have to remember them. So they have one that says if it's in the future. I'm actually going to say if it's in the past. So I'm going to say if the selected day is less than today, then I can define an action. So what I'm going to have the action be is I'll create a label that says the departure date can't be in the past. Which seems like a pretty reasonable rule. So I'm also going to have a button that doesn't do anything yet, but we'll say that this button will be our form that we'll be able to submit with. So we'll leave our button there, and we'll add a rule. Let's see. And then for our rules, we'll be able to set up our macros for them. So I'll rename this to say departure date error so that we can find it. And then the other thing that I will do for departure date error is I will turn it to not visible. So now we don't see it anymore, which makes it even more important that I can find it by selecting it. So if I define the actions, I'm going to say it's going to record what I'm going to do. And what I'll do is I'll say, okay, departure date error is now visible. And our button will say is now disabled. Then I'll say I'm done. So we can look at the rule that's been created, and it says that button 1 has been disabled and that visible is now true for our departure date error. We can see the effect of this by looking and running our application. And if we select today, our button is there and we don't see an error message. And if we select yesterday, we can see that our button is no longer clickable and we have our departure date error. One thing that we probably also want to change on here is we probably want our item to be a little bit more error-y. So we'll have the text be red on that so that it shows up a little bit more, that if we select an old date or a new date, we can see the message go away. So at this point, we've created a pretty basic form that captures the information that we're looking for, but there are probably some better ways that we can use to actually get the information and work with it. So one of the ways that we can do that is by using connections. So the concept of connections is PowerApps can call out to external applications and external data sources, and then you can use that information to give you context, to make your form smarter, or you can even trigger actions to occur. So here are some of the common items that people are connecting to: SQL Server, especially SQL Server in Azure, Dynamics, Office 365, Excel documents, OneDrive. Those are very common ones that people are connecting to. However, there is strong third-party support where there are a lot of different applications that are available inside of the interface, and most major cloud applications have a connector that you can use already. And you can also create custom connectors. So if you have developers inside of your organization and you need to connect to a very specific system or have it perform a very specific task, you can actually create a connector that can be used by PowerApps and have it go deep into your custom line of business system. So we're going to use that to connect to some data and make our form a little bit smarter here. So what we'll do is we'll go back, and our combo boxes right now, or our departure airports right now, are just text boxes. So we'll delete these, and we'll actually change them to combo boxes because we want to have the right airport, because it's a pretty terrible idea to allow people to book and not know exactly which airport they had in mind. So we'll select the combo box, and we'll put it in here. And one of the things that it's going to ask us is what data do we want to have? So we'll make sure we rename this to, we'll go with CBO departure airport. And then we'll select some data. So now let's add a data source. It's not just a sample data source. So we'll add a new data source. And in my case, what I've done is I have created an Excel file that has a list of all of the airports in the United States in it. So here is an Excel file that I've created that has all the airports in it. So in order to reference that, I can say I'm going to add some static data to my application. I'm going to import it from Excel. And I'll load up that Excel file. Now inside of there, I can see that I have two tables, one called store data and one called airports. I'll select airports, hit connect. And now I can see that this is tied to airports, and I can select either the airport or the code for the primary text and the airport or the code for the search field. So if I look and see what this looks like now, if I preview this application, I can see that I have a big list of airports, and I can also type now to find the different airport that I'm looking for. However, if I do a search for something that has the airport code like MSP, I don't see the Minneapolis airport. If I do a code search for LAX, I also don't see it. So this is something that we'll probably want to change in the future. Now let's go ahead and add this again for our arrival airport. So once again, we'll add the arrival airport. We'll rename it. We'll put it in here, and then we'll select our data source. We've already got airports in here. We don't have to re-add it, and we have it set. So now we have the ability to find our airport and see it in there. We can also make this a little bit better, because we would like it if somebody types MSP or LAX to be able to select the different field, or to find the right airport based on that. So that's where this search fields category comes in, or the search fields item. So right now it's only searching the airport name. I can add in and say, you know what, I also want you to search in the code. So if I do that for this one, and then I go to the other airport, I can change the formula to do both. Now, if I preview this application, I can type MSP, and it searches Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. I can do the same thing now with LAX, and even though it's not visible, I can select the right airport. So if I know the airport code that I'm using, I now can more easily find it. However, if I don't know the airport code, it still looks like it's a little bit challenging, because these are in all kinds of different orders right now. So I think there's still some work to be done there. And then also our traveler name I'm manually having to type in right now. So there's probably a way that I can make this a little bit better. And in PowerApps, what we're talking about there is functions. So inside of functions, we use an Excel-like syntax basically to add some smarts, to add some logic to our PowerApp. So we go up into our formula bar, and that's where we can type something. So like in this example, sum of 1 and 1, I'm adding 1 and 1, and it's going to display 2. So a lot of these are based on existing formula names. So if you know a formula in Excel, you can start typing that and see if that works for you inside of PowerApp. So things like sum and average, which is spelled average, not AVG in the Excel side. But min, max, round, those are all the sorts of things that you'd expect to see in there. There's also date logic. Many of our forms have to do with dates. You know, if we're creating things like a travel request, if we're creating an employee onboarding form, if we're creating a, save a new sale form, all of these things require dates. So having functions that support dates is important for us to be able to do some of the calculations. So date add is adding days or adding one time to another, essentially. So if you want to say take today and add 7 days for it, for when a task should get created, you can use date add for that. Date diff allows you to compare 2 dates and find the difference between them. Is today is a very useful function to determine whether or not it's today. And then you can also use day, month, year, time, hour, minute, seconds to find components of dates very easily. Another common thing that we find ourselves doing is working with text. So things like concatenating text or appending 2 different strings together, taking chunks out of text, so that's kind of your left, mid, right setup, and then also replace or substitute different strings inside of there. So this is kind of a subset of overall functions, but just to kind of give you an idea for different things that are out there. Some of the things that you might be less familiar with are working with lists and groups. Inside of our forms, we are frequently working with more than one item, not just a single travel request. We might be getting a list of tasks. We might be getting calendar items. We might be getting leads from CRM. So working with lists and groups is another thing that we need to be able to do. So we have the ability to say, I want the first one, or I want the first 5, or the last. I want to sort by a specific property. I want to group different items together, or I'm given a list of items, I want to find a specific one. So what we'll do now is use some functions to make our application a little bit smarter. So first of all, there is a fantastic function that's built right into PowerApps that can get the current user, and it's named user, which is a very useful thing to use. So right now we can see that the text for the traveler name is just set to whatever somebody puts in. So I'm going to change this function, and I'm going to use the user function, and I'm going to say I want to use user, and we can see I have a few options here. I can say email, I can say full name, or I can say image. And in this case, I'm going to use the user full name. Now immediately, it's going to fill in that I am Neil Iverson. So now I no longer have to type anything in the traveler name. When I fire up this form, it automatically sees, all right, well, who is using this form and what is their name? And it puts it in there. I can do the same thing for the email address, which is also very useful. So I will use, I'm now going to make one of these a little bit easier to use. As you may recall, when we looked at our departure airport list, there was all kinds of different items in here, and they were in no particular order. So if I wanted to look at them, I had to just scroll through. So I think it starts right now. It's in the order they were in the Excel document. So we actually started with Alabama, and then we go to Alaska, and then they're kind of organized by state in a way that you can't see. Not a very intuitive way. So let's sort these. So I'll select my box, and I can see that over here, this is the items. So this is where it actually gets the items for the list. So what I can use is a function. So I will use the sort by columns function, which we can see is auto-completing for me. Now I'll say I want to sort airports, and I want to sort it by the airport column. And now if I look and see what this looks like, the airports are now in alphabetical order based on the airport name. I could do the same thing with the airport code if I wanted to. So I've set this up. I'm able to use this. One of the other things that might be useful is the ability for someone to get some help, get some assistance. So I've got an icon library that's built into PowerApps that lets me select different icons and use them. So we can see there's, add and cancel. I want to give people the ability to have kind of like a help icon. So there's an icon in here called information. And I will take that one and I'll put it right here. So we'll kind of call this the help icon. Now, what I'm going to do is actually add a new screen. So I have a button up here. I'll add a new screen. And I'll give this screen a better name than I did the first one. I'll call this screen help. And inside of here, we'll have a help screen. So we'll put in some information that says, hey, you know what? This is an application to help you submit your travel. That's a pretty good name. On this screen, if we just run our PowerApp right now, we will be stranded on this screen because there is no way to get back to the main screen. So if we run it, it'll start off right here and we can't really do anything. So what we need to do is add an element so that we can get back to the main screen. So we'll add another image, and there are a few different ones. You can pick the one that you like. I like this back arrow. And in order to move backwards, what we use is the navigate function. So we can say navigate, and then it says, okay, which screen do you want? And we will say we want to go to screen 1 because I did not give it a very good name. And then we get to pick our transition, and I will pick uncover as our transition. So now we have the way to get back. So now let's link up on screen 1 our ability to go to that screen. So on select in here, we'll say navigate, screen help, and our transition this time will be cover. So now we have an additional screen. If somebody is in here and they say, what's this thing do? We can now click on our information. It covers up, it shows the screen with our very helpful screen message. We hit back and we can get back to our form. So now we've added an additional field and we've created the ability for our items to be sorted, and now we don't even have to type in our name because it automatically has that on there. So we've really used 3 functions to do quite a bit for us. So we've really got a lot more polish on here. But at this point, it still is, it works on our machine, as they say. It doesn't really do anything else. It doesn't go out anywhere. So let's look at how we can share some of these things. So we can publish these and we can share them either with a few people. We can specifically name some people, or we can hit a button that says give access to everyone in my organization. You can also give other people the ability to edit your application. So if you are working with another person, if you want someone else to be able to maintain it, you can give them edit permission. So we have very fine-grained permission. And then you have the ability to pick the versions that you're working with. So you can publish a version for everyone to see, and you can have a version that you're working on. They don't have to be the same one. One of the other interesting things to know is that they do have some basic analytics now for PowerApps around the usage information. This is still in preview, as you can see by the screenshot, but it gives you the ability to see how many people open the application, how much time was your application used in the last week or month. It really gives you a feel for how useful people are finding your application. So we're going to share our application, but then we're also going to make it actually do something. We're going to make it so that when we hit our submit button, our data goes somewhere. So I'm going to set our date so we can get rid of our message. And then I'm going to add another connector. So if we go to view, we can see data sources. We're going to add a new data source. We're going to add a connector so that we can send an email. So this will be a very basic one. Now I've already added my connection to my Office 365 account to PowerApps as a whole, but not this specific PowerApp. So we can see that I'm saying, all right, I need a new connection, but I already have my credentials in here. If I go to new connection, it'll give you that screenshot where I can pick from a whole bunch of different connections. But at this point, I'm already signed in to Office 365 Outlook, and I'm going to use that to send my message. So I'll select that, and now that connection has been brought into this as a data source. So I can now use this item in here. So when I click this button, I want it to send out essentially a version of this request form via email. Now, one of the best practices that I like is to create a screen that has the information on it, that has kind of the variables so that you can see it, so that you can debug it, so that you don't have to always look at your email and click the button 50 times to see if you've got the formatting right. So I'm going to add a new screen, and this is a screen that's essentially just for me. It's a screen that's not really going to show up anywhere else. And so I'll call this screen variables. And in here, what I really want to do is have the email message that I'm going to send out there. I want to have it previewed in here so that I can make sure it looks like what I want it to be. So I've already got the HTML code, and I'll walk you through it. But now I can see this is basically the message that I'm going to send out. So if I look at this, we can see it says traveler, and then it references the control traveler name.txt, the departure date.selected date. It also finds the airport from the combo box selected items. Now, one of the things that the combo box can allow you to do is select multiple items. In this case, we're only allowing it to select one. And so what I'm having to do is say, take the first item of those selected items, because, like I say, the combo box could accept multiple items, but we really only are allowing you to go to one airport. You can't specify that you're departing from 2 airports. You can only say that you're departing from 1 airport. So this is kind of the text of the email. So I could say, I could add something on here that says, a travel request has been submitted. And then I can add a little bit of HTML to format it. And so now this is essentially the body of the text that I want. So I've called this HTML email, which is a reasonably good name. And if I look at it, I can say, all right, this is what I want to get as an email. So if I go back to my main screen, I'm now going to make it so this button, when you click on it, will send that email. So the connector that I have is Office 365. And you can see the different items that it can do. And I'm doing a send email, which is a pretty good name. So you can see up here, it's telling me the different pieces that I need to have. So I need to have 2. In this case, I'm just going to have it send it to myself. We'll say that it's going to send a travel request. And then for the body, I'm going to say HTML email .html text. So that will send exactly that control that I sent from the other side. Now, there's actually additional arguments, additional things that I can pass in here. So you can see if I wanted to pass attachments or BCC or CC. There is one that I do want to set, and that's this is HTML. So this allows me to use HTML formatting. Otherwise, it's going to come across really ugly as text. So I'm going to say that it is HTML. And then it will now send this item out for me. The one downside of me just setting it up like this is I'll click the button, it will send, but the user using the PowerApp doesn't get to see anything. So there's a great command called notify that will let me deliver a message to them, kind of a temporary message. In order to do another command, there's kind of a secret handshake here where I do a double ampersand. That allows me to do multiple functions in a row. So once it has submitted it, I can say notify your request has been sent. And now we can see if it all works. So it picked who I am. I'm going to say a departure airport. I'm going to say that I'm leaving from Minneapolis and that I'm going to go to Los Angeles and that I have a return date, and I will hit my button and it will depress down, send an email. We can see that it's thinking up top right now. And once the email has been sent, I will get my notification. And here's my notification that says my request has been sent. And if I go over into my inbox, here it is. I can see that it looks exactly like we set up in that tab. So if we compare, if we look at our screen here, and we look at my email, we can see that the travel request is formatted exactly like it was here. It even has the new text that we just added. So now I'm pretty happy with my form. I feel like, all right, this is workable. When somebody has a travel request, they can work with it, they can send it out. Now it's time for me to actually share it with someone. So if I go up to my ribbon, I can give it a name like travel request. There are different icons that we can use here with different symbols on them, which is nice to be able to use. So we'll take an easy one. We'll just go with the ever popular soccer ball. We can give it a color. Oops, that's the Earth. We'll go with the Earth then. We'll travel request, and we have it saved. We can save it. We can put any description that we want to on here. We can save it, and then once we have it saved, once we have it out here, then we can start to share it with other people. So we can share this application. And from here, you can see the screen that was in my previous screenshot, where we can see that I own it, that I've published a version, and now I can invite people to it. So if I'm going to invite my coworker, Brian, who's actually doing the Office 365 Power App, I'm going to say, you know what, not only can he use this, he can also edit it. So now he is going to get a notification that says, all right, you now have the ability to edit this. We can see on the details what connections are required for this. We're using one actual connection, and then the Excel document is actually embedded inside the Power application. We can see a link, so if we just want to email someone, and then we can see Brian has access to it. If we want to look at versions, we can see when we created it. From a settings standpoint, this allows us to change the different versions that people have access to, change our descriptions, use categories. And then finally, the analytics tab. allows us to see the base analytics for how people are using the application, what platforms they're using it on, how it's performing, and then the different locations where those people are at. There's also some preview features around importing and exporting these applications, so that as you create them, if you want to move them between different business units or entire organizations, you have a package format that you can use to move those across. So what we've done today is we've created a cross-platform application. We have added some admittedly simple validation to it. We've connected it to Excel. We've also connected it to Office 365 and sent an email as ourselves. And then we've securely shared the application with other people. So kind of where we can go from here, in the next session, Brian will be going over really making this application a lot smarter and kind of production worthy. So he'll be adding on additional Office 365 features and the ability to use Flow, which gives us the ability to use additional logic outside of what we're already doing inside of PowerApps. And then finally, our third session is on using dynamics with PowerApps, and that will be using the entity-based model, what we've seen so far as Canvas. And so if you're interested in seeing what's inside of the dynamics integrations, that'll be a good one to hit. So some additional reading that you can have, and these resources will be sent out as well. Microsoft has some really good guided learning tutorials that cover some of what I have here. There's also some help topics, complete list of all of the functions that you can use. The community support is pretty good inside of the community site. And then finally, the team blog. There are a lot of things that are changing kind of constantly inside of PowerApps, new features getting added. For example, that notify function that I showed you actually just got added like 2 weeks ago. So there are new functions, new capabilities, new abilities that you'll probably learn about there first. With that, I do want to thank everybody for coming to this session. The recording of this will be available, and also the resources list. If you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to us here at Avtex. We're happy to help. Thank you very much, and have a good day.